And I get a phone call from my lawyer. And she's like, hey, and I mean, just right into it. There was no, hey, how's your day going? I learned very shortly after why.
Straight to business.
Straight to business. Yes. Hey, just got word from the district attorney's office. They're charging you with reckless manslaughter. I'm sitting in my car, and I'm just like, and my mind went blank. My hands instantly went cold and clammy. I'm like, I mean, the life just left my body. I'm like, what?
Hey guys, we're just a few weeks into the new year, and many of you have made resolutions, goals, and are driving forward towards those goals. And in doing so, you're going to face adversity and challenges. And many times we think about consequences to the actions that we make, but many times we don't think about consequences of the inaction, the things that we don't do and the actions we don't take. I'm here today with my friend Adam Lunn, who is going to share a long story. This will be a longer podcast episode, close to 2 hours. And get ready for a ride. He's going to share his journey of not only some decisions he made, but some decisions he didn't, and how that changed the trajectory of his life, his family's life, and ultimately brought him to a sense of gratitude and appreciation and desire to serve God and his kingdom. So get ready for this wild 2-hour ride and enjoy the show. Are you a faith-based father and looking for intentional ways to connect with your son in a big way? If so, you have to check out the Father-Son Hike of a Lifetime on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. June 2025, I am taking a group of faith-based fathers and their sons over to Spain for 9 days and the adventure of a lifetime. Go check it out at mattshoup.com/Spain. On that page, you'll actually see all of my upcoming Spain adventures, but make sure to check out the Father-Son Hike of a Lifetime. Adam Lunn.
Matt.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Your first podcast.
It is.
How you feeling about that?
A little anxious, a little nervous. You know, just
Yeah.
You haven't done anything, so nothing to compare it to.
Well, we just met through a really great mutual friend.
Yes.
Leslie Coy.
Yes.
Yeah, her kiddos train here.
Yeah, they're an amazing family.
How do you know them? Reconnect me with how you got connected with them.
Yeah, so we were attending a church in Johnstown here locally called Cornerstone. And we got to know them. There was a very, very unfortunate event that Leslie and her children had to experience. But through that time, that was back in, I don't want to mess up dates, but it was a while ago. And
yes.
So we've maintained friendships, and I've gotten to know the Coy kids really well. Have a heart for them. They no longer have their father in their life for very tragic reasons. That being said, I have a heart for him, and I was organizing some not leadership, but some camping trips and stuff like that, and so got to expose them to some things that was a lot of fun. Take a lot of pride in that, just to be a positive influence on them, and they're great kids. There's 5 of them, and oldest is in college right now. She's back for the holiday season, which we are just love to see Lily. I'm glad she's back, and the whole Coy group is back together for a short period of time. So great, just love seeing them. We go to the same church now, which is Mountain View Community Church up in Fort Collins. When I was at the halfway house up there, that's how we found Mountain View, and it's only going to be a God thing. It doesn't make sense any other ways. Yeah. And so, and then, maintaining communication with Leslie while I was incarcerated, and Leslie being there for my wife, Erica, during that time as well. It took our friendship to just more of a familial feeling, and they're great. They're just incredible people, just inspiring and just kind, and the middle boys, Max and DJ, are watching the banter. Now that Lily's back in town, watching them do that is just, it's a lot of fun. And, but they're family to us. And so we love them and truly value their friendship. So,
and their kids are little savages out here. They came in, Max knew a little bit of jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the other kiddos had trained. I think it was just Max, maybe DJ a little bit.
Yeah.
But they're savages out here.
Well, the first time I ever met you was at a tournament.
When we did fuzzies after the tournament. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Leslie'd been telling me about you and your story, and we're going to talk about it, get into it. She's like, you guys got to meet.
Yeah.
And we never did till that tournament.
Correct. Yeah. And then, so that was cool. And so that was my first experience watching Max. And, I did martial arts and stuff growing up, and kickboxing and boxing. So it was fun because I've been there. I have competed, a little bit younger than Max, but it's just, it takes you back to, just the memories just come flooding in, and just the chaos and the listening for your name. And so it was really cool. It was a great experience. But then to watch Max compete, come to find out he competed against another kid his age that I know the parents, used to work with them at the county. And
that's right. I remember that.
Yeah, it's just a small world.
Yeah.
It was cool, but it was great to see Max compete, and he dominated. He's so bendy and so scrawny that he's the epitome of what jiu-jitsu. Yeah.
Can you imagine just being the poor guy that picks on that kid and picks the wrong kid to pick on at the wrong day?
It's a bad day.
What's funny as a coach is we get to sit on the sidelines, and you have to verbalize what to do. You're telling them what to do. And when you're competing, if you can't hear the coach's voice and then connect that to doing what you're supposed to do in real time, it makes it tough. And I see that as a coach. This kid doesn't even hear what I'm saying now. And it was like I was an earpiece in his ear. Max, put your right hand here. And he's literally ahead of he's doing it as I'm thinking it about to say it.
Yeah.
And just dominating people.
And there's that and obviously he's still a young man, but he's got a lot of what I would consider to be it. The mentality, the physical abilities, being coachable is so underrated, I feel. And that's something that he possesses. And so it was fun to watch. And I look forward to, going to another match and just watching them. And I'd love to come here and just observe, watching all the kids. And
it's fun. We have fun down there.
Yeah.
Well, it's growing.
And I'm glad to hear that. That's amazing. These young kids, they need this. And so it's awesome that you are able to provide this for them, and just a good, safe place. And like I said, when going back to why, this even is happening right now, is it's just about relationships, right?
Yeah.
And God works in amazing, amazing ways. And it's hard to articulate at times, you got to reflect on it, and, but it's cool. I'm super pumped that you guys are doing this, but I want to come in and just watch.
Anytime. Yeah. You've been in here twice for coffee. So Leslie's saying, hey, you got to meet Adam, and tells me a little bit of your story. And, Leslie Coy's and our stories connected because of Chris Bruno, who's a great friend of mine. And he's been on the podcast. We have a long time relationship with him. So then when Leslie starts sharing a little bit, I'm like, well, I'd love to meet him. So we have some fuzzies after the tournament.
Yep.
We didn't really talk much about what we're about to jump into, but then you came up here day after Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And we hung out for 3.5 hours. Had coffee.
Yeah, over 3 hours.
And then you shared what you're about to share here. So let's dive in, man. Sure. You mentioned that you were incarcerated and then in the halfway house, and now we're here, and take me back to that story.
Yeah. So I was a Boulder County Sheriff's deputy for a little over 10 years, and September 8th, 2018, I was post certified, so I could go to the streets and stuff like that. But I spent the majority of my time in the jail. I enjoyed the jail. The stories are plentiful, but it's a society within a society.
It's its own culture in there, right?
Oh yeah, very much so. So I was I had aspirations of going out to patrol. And so I was able to work extra duties, and, it's just stuff outside of my regular schedule work and whatnot. And so that night I was tasked with, doing transports. It was back to school for CU. And so they wanted to saturate the hill area of Boulder and the campus, to just kind of mitigate some of the wild parties and behavior. And
I was on the hill back in college. Yeah.
Oh, you went to CU?
No, CSU.
Oh, yeah.
CSU.
Well, of course.
CSU. But I know what goes on the hill. Yeah. That's the party strip right there. That's all the chaos.
Yep. So we were tasked with just, CU PD and Boulder PD were going to establish the the means to take someone on an ARC hold. That's the addiction recovery center, aka the drunk tank. So we were just going to be dispatched to different locations within city of Boulder, and my partner and I were tasked with just picking them up, just transporting them, and
so pretty regular business. You've done this a lot, or this has been done a lot. This is a common occurrence that you pick people up, transport them.
And it's interesting because it's technically speaking, it's a medical call. But the powers that be had kind of looked at, I think, logistics and cost. And so this was the setup that they had come up with, like, hey, instead of calling an ambulance every time, to take someone to the drunk tank, we're going to hire you guys. And so it was.
Who decides that?
I don't know. I couldn't answer that honestly, but it's people with, it's going to be the sheriff or the undersheriff. It's going to be, probably an assistant police chief and the people that it's upper management. So I can't honestly say in this situation, but it's people that have obviously a vested interest in the community, with some time and rank. And so we showed up. I had, like, far too often, I had left the family to go work and to serve the community of Boulder County. And then I went, just like any other day, left wife and my 2 kids at the time there at the Harvest Festival in Meade. That's where I live. And so I left, went in, we had a taco bar at the Boulder PD, and, they did all their talking and their logistics and all that. And then they're like, oh, hey, and we got those guys in the back, Boulder County, they'll be running the transport van for pickups. It's like, all right, cool. And that was it. So we went out and we were dispatched to one call earlier, took a young lady to the ARC. And then about 2:30, 2:40 in the morning, so September 9th, 2018, we were dispatched to, I think, 8th and Canyon there in Boulder. And we show up on scene, and a young man, he's intoxicated. He's falling, or he's already on the ground when we get there. But at this point, we'd only contacted just the young man's name is Demetrius. Boulder PD was there, 2 officers, and then we showed up. And so got on scene, and he was a drunk college kid. And so we're like, all right, no big deal. And so we go to handcuff him, but he's kind of being verbally antagonistic, if you will, just talking trash. And that's fine. I don't care. It's a drunk college kid. That's what they do. So, but he resists. And when I say resist, there's a lot of different levels of resistance. He was just verbally resistant and passively resistant. So, like, if you're trying to discipline your children and you're walking them to their room and they go limp, yep, that's passive resistance. That's what we were experiencing with this young man. So no big deal. But at that point in time, we have to think of officer safety. So we had originally been belly chaining them and handcuffing them in the front because they're compliant. That wasn't the case with this young man. So my partner, who's a senior guy, he's got a lot more time and experience than I did, and so he's kind of driving that ship. So we kind of communicate real briefly, like, hey, let's just go ahead and handcuff him behind his back. And again, this is all for officer safety purposes. So we start walking him back to the van.
Let me ask you, so instead of chaining in the front, you're restraining, taking the arms behind the back.
Yeah.
Why is that? How is he more or less dangerous in one of those positions versus another? Seems like he's restrained.
Correct. And so there's a common misconception with handcuffs. Everyone thinks, oh, handcuffs they're great, and they're just like this magical thing, and they're not at all. They're temporary restraints. Yep. There are a lot of different videos online, stuff like that anyone can see, and where you just bind up those links and you just break them. And now all of a sudden we go from, maybe talking a little bit of trash, cursing us out and passive, to all of a sudden he has weapons on his wrists, and we have weapons all over us. Guns, knives, sharp, pointy things. And so you just have to take the mindset. You have to always be in control. That's our job. It's to keep everyone safe. Yeah. And it's for their safety just as much as it is for our safety. So because he was displaying a possibility of escalating his behavior, we went ahead and chose to handcuff him behind his back. Got it. Okay. It would take a lot more effort on his part to if you will, just fight. And so we made that decision at that time. So
That makes sense. Okay.
So we're walking to the back of the van, and that's again where that like passive resistance comes in. He kind of is giving his legs out. And it's like, come on, dude. And so in this moment, I'm trying to communicate with him as much as possible, because there was some communication between my partner and Demetrius they were working each other up. So
you and I we sat for 3.5 hours because we watched frame by frame, like minute by minute. We watched the entire incident from
body cam footage and stuff
start
like
to
that.
finish. So I don't know who started it, but they were both talking trash to each other.
Yeah.
And anteing it up.
Yeah. And
in that exchange, would you say?
I would say that, yes. Yeah. And so, I had some great supervisors in my time in the jail, and one supervisor specifically had really enforced or encouraged us to lower our voices, get down to their level, a lot like what, servers are taught and stuff like that, just to make that personal communication or that connection, just talk on their level, talk to them like they're a human being, because they are. And so I saw right away, it's like, we don't need this to be escalated. And so that's why, as far as the communication, I tried to take over. So I got down to his level and I tried communicating with him, and as much as you can with a drunk college kid. And so I had taken over that communication role, and we're walking to the back of the van, and this is a transport van. So this is a van that is designed to take cooperative, in custody people, like to and from, so from like the jail to courts, or from the jail to a hospital or something like that. So it's not designed for what we're using it for. But
they're just sitting safely, quietly, short trip.
Yeah. You're sitting upright. You got your seat belts and all that stuff, but it just is not designed for the purpose that we were using it for. Mm-hmm. And those are all decisions that were made by folks.
But that's what you've got, right? So you were tasked with that task with the tools and equipment you have.
Yes.
And then you respond to that scene and make those calls that you make up to the point.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah. So we get them to the back of the van, open up the van. Just for a lot of reasons, I'm right-handed. Jim's right-handed. We open up the right door. There's two doors. So you have the van door, and then inside that the back of a 12-passenger van, it's called a cassette. It's something that slides in much like a cassette would in a tape deck or whatever, but then it gets secured to the floor, to the frame of that van. So it is now a holding cage, if you will, inside of a van. So we open up the van door, and then we open up the cassette door.
And there's two cassettes inside.
So there's two compartments.
Compartments, right?
The cassette is all one piece, but yeah, there's two compartments. So there's a left compartment, driver side, and then there's a right compartment, passenger side. So we, at that point, we opened up the doors. We had a puke bucket with some extra chains, belly chains and handcuffs and stuff like that was blocking the left door. So again, these are all decisions that we're making that, we don't have the luxury of time when you're out on scene. You have to make split-second decisions constantly. That's the job, and that's fine. That's why a lot of people are drawn to that job. It's a tremendous amount of pressure and stress, and obviously life and death decisions. And so we go to open up that cassette. So we open the van door, we open the cassette door, and it's because this is a van that it's all aftermarket. Everything about this truck or the van is all aftermarket. It has to be beefed up because you're putting all this extra weight into it. Yep. So it has a little bit bigger suspension. And then it has this cassette, which off the floor of the van is another approximately 6 inches. And so at this point in time, I'm talking to this young man. I'm like, hey, I need you to go ahead and step up into the van and I'll help you out, and he wouldn't. And then he's still talking this whole time, and just vulgar behavior and words, and I don't care. So in that moment, I've practiced it many, many times in my time in law enforcement. I have to gain your compliance, and the best way that I've found to gain that compliance and get you to do what I need you to do is just to build a little bit of a rapport with you in a very, very short period of time. While I'm in the jail, I have a lot of time, but when you're out on scene in the public, you have seconds. And so, so I'm just like, hey, dude, I need you to step up. And he's like, nah. And at this point, he kind of lays himself down. He stops standing on his own and he lays down face first on the floor of the van and proceeds with some real just silly behavior. So at this point in time, I kind of look over to my partner. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna stand him up. And so I reach into the van and I grab him and I stand him up. And so at that point, again, I'm trying to just gain his compliance. Like, dude, I just need you to do this. And so we're face to face, and I don't view him as a threat, but it's something you gotta always be ready for. But I'm trying to. So we talk a little trash, and I'm like, listen, dude, you're. Like,
we meaning you to him?
Demetrius and I are now communicating face to face. My partner is behind him, just again maintaining control of Demetrius in case something happens. And so I'm talking to him. I'm like, come on, man, just step up. You're a big guy. I want to help you up. I don't want you to hit your head. And he's like, what am I doing? Why am I even being taken? I'm like, well, you're not in trouble, dude. Let's just you're gonna go to the ark. You're gonna sleep it off, and we'll move on. And so it just didn't. He was not complying. Yeah. So at that point, when our conversation, he just was done with our conversation. He again stopped standing on his own, and he fell into onto the floor of the van.
Did he intentionally, do you think, put his body down, like throw his body down?
Yes. Yeah, okay, I would, and it wasn't like a.
So he wasn't passing out.
No, he was not.
He's just dropping his weight, just dead weighting.
He chose to.
Yep.
He made a lot of choices that night, and so at that point in time, speaking of choices, my partner made the choice to kind of pick him up, and then then put him into the back of the van. So this is something, again, you don't have luxury of time on scene. So that was a decision that my partner made. And then I kind of followed suit. It's like, okay, that ball is rolling. We need to keep it in motion. So we go to put him in. He's handcuffed behind his back. He's on his side. He wasn't on his face. He was on his right side. And so we push him in, or we push him in. And at that point, his legs are just straight out. And he won't allow us to close the door. And so I reach in there to try and get his legs out of the way so we can close the cassette door, and then we would close the van door and we would be on our way. But he just continued to resist and make it harder than I was hoping that he would. So at that point in time, again, we have a job to do. A lot of choices were made ahead of this time to bring our lives together, as far as, my life, my partner life, and this young man's life. And so at this point, though, we have a job to do. Our goal is to get him to the drunk tank. And then that staff would take custody of him, and then they would proceed. So, but, the struggle, so then we had to wait. The Boulder PD officers that had established the ARC hold, one was in training. So there was a trainee and a field trainer. And so they were kind of talking to get the paperwork done. And so that took a little bit of time. And then, so once we got the van door secured, we come around the front of the van and we were communicating with the two Boulder PD officers. And, just they're explaining, take this to the ARC and we'll leave it, or we'll leave it at the PD, you can come grab it, whatever. There's a conversation that occurs. And so we get the paperwork. I was driving between my partner and I. We decided that because I worked in the jail, I had a lot more experience driving these vans than my partner did, because he was on patrol. So they have just different vehicles for patrol vehicles. And so I jump in the front seat. My partner jumps in the passenger seat. At that point in time, we look in there's a camera. There's cameras in each compartment in the back, and the screen. I mean, when we took actual measurements, I think it was 2 inches by 2 inches, and that's mounted on the dash of the van. And so, we look at this and we see that he hasn't really moved. And so so my partner and I decide, like, hey, let's, what are we going to do? So my partner ends up going into there's two compartments on the passenger side. So right directly behind him, there's a little where the sliding door is. Demetrius was not in that compartment. There was a compartment that was behind that. So, he's still secured in the far rear passenger side compartment. So my partner gets out, he opens the sliding door of the van, opens the swing door of the cassette, and he gets in there and he's like, hey, Demetrius, you okay? Or we can't leave until you acknowledge me, or I don't know what his full intent was, but he's just trying to make sure he's okay. And so he's sitting there. So I'm looking through the metal mesh, at my partner and, just observing. And so finally he's like, my partner's like, well, hey, he's breathing. So let's go. It's like, okay. So he go
breathing, conscious, unconscious. He's breathing. Did you know? Did you check?
So at that point in time,
did he know? You're driving.
So I'm in the driver's seat. So, and my partner visually observed him breathing, the rise and fall of a chest. Now, anything beyond that, again, thinking about officer safety, we are taught through a lot of different training that you don't re-engage. If you re-engage with a suspect or a detainee or an arrestee, the likelihood of catastrophic and or fatal events occurring they go up exponentially.
Yep.
So these are all things that we know as law enforcement, and that we're always taking into consideration. So at that point in time, we're not going to go back and re-engage. It's about a 6-minute drive from where we were at to the drunk tank, to the ARC. And so at that point, it's like, well, we have a job to do. Let's just get them there. There's medical staff there. We are not medical staff. We are trained in very basic, first aid and whatnot. But our job was to get him to a quote unquote medical facility that is better equipped to handle these folks. And so he gets back, my partner at that point gets back into the front seat, passenger side, secures everything up, and we drive. And, at that point I'm driving. So, but my partner's keeping an eye on that little screen, and he doesn't move. He's not moving. I think if I remember correctly, we're about a couple minutes out from the ARC, and we hear we hit a bump in the road, and then we heard a bump on the floor. And I looked down and I saw that his leg that he had extended and like locked out, it fell. So it's like, okay, just an observation at that point. So we get to the ARC, pull up to the front, get out. We open up the rear of the van, open up the van door, open up the cassette door. And so again, I'm on the left side, my partner's on the right side, and just instantly it's like something's not right. And so at that point, my partner kind of steps up into the cassette and is, like, hey, Demetrius here, we're here, get up, wake up, and no response. So at that point, he kind of steps even further into the van, and he can see that his lips are blue. So at that point, the situation is amped up. And so my partner pulls him out. We both, get him towards the back of the tailgate or the bumper. And then obviously we take hold of him, and then we lay him down on the cement or the pavement right behind the van. And he's like, we got to get a handcuff off. And so I grab a handcuff key. I remove one of the arms or one of his wrists from the handcuff, and we position him, on his back, and Jim starts administering CPR. Yep. At that point, there was a ton of radio traffic. And so we need to make a call for emergency services to respond to the ARC. But Jim is primary now on life-saving efforts. And so I'm observing. At that point, I think a radio call went out at some point. I didn't make the radio call initially, but that's what it was. Some CUPD officers had just happened to come behind us, and so they saw that we were administrating life-saving efforts. And then they made a call, and then I was unaware. There was so much chatter, and you train yourself to listen for your radio number, whatnot. But so a radio call was made, and so then all of a sudden, the dispatcher tries to kind of shut down the channel, and like you just you address the channel like, hey, to establish what is needed at that time.
Yeah.
So the dispatcher kind of initiates that, and so then I respond. I'm like, with my badge number, I'm like, yes, we do need emergency services to the ARC, and so then that kind of goes. That's officially initiated at that point. The two officers from CUPD are talking to my partner like, hey, do you need to trade off because something about CPR, when you're administering CPR, it's like a fight, right? Yep. It's like a match. 30 seconds feels like 30 minutes. And so, my partner's administrating CPR and, I'm like, everyone's just asking him, do you need to be relieved? Do you need me to take over? And he's like, no. And so finally, an ambulance shows up. And so then at that point, shortly before the ambulance shows up, Jim did relinquish those duties to a CUPD officer. And so they maintained CPR efforts. And so at that point, I'm still just standing by, just observing. And Jim kind of stands up and he's upset. He is very, very upset. He's yelling and screaming, what happened? Why, why? And so at that point, I'm just like trying to support my partner. I'm like, listen, man, I don't know. We don't know right now. And so ambulance shows up. They take over everything. They hook them up to not an AED, but their monitor. So they're doing all that. They do have a pulse. It's not normal. It's low, but he does have a pulse. And so he regained his color and all that as well. So at that point in time, paramedics put him on the stretcher, and they take him. They take him over to I want to say I think it was Boulder County Hospital, BCH. And so then at that point, supervisors start showing up, and so we went after that. We are told to report to the jail, which is just across the parking lot from the ARC. So we report to the briefing room in the jail, and we're awaiting supervisors and then a detective because it's an in-custody death. So at that point, we're just waiting, and Jim is still very, very upset and shaken, rightfully so. And I'm just my focus is kind of trying to support him because he was distraught. Yep. And so I'm trying to support him and talk with him. And so we finally, the adrenaline starts to wear off. And, at this point, it's in the early hours of the morning.
Had you worked with him before up to this point? You had a lot of experience on shift or duty with him?
No, he had worked in the jail while I was there, he had worked in the jail for, I think, just shy of a year. He had been brought back to the jail for reasons that patrol justified. So I'd worked with him some in the modules, but he was primarily a patrol deputy, whereas I was primarily a jail deputy. And so when we worked together, it was maybe a dozen times, just working the modules in the jail. But no, I hadn't worked with him a ton. I knew him, but
the first time you guys were together with this kind of situation where stakes are high and
on patrol, yes, this was our first time.
Energy's up. Okay.
Yeah. And he had also experienced he'd just gotten off of an extended FMLA leave. His wife had a stroke. And so it was his first, I think, couple weeks back on patrol, back full time. And so he was dealing with a lot. And so we're in the briefing room just waiting, and we kind of concluded that process. We spoke to the detective and supervisors and whatnot, and then we wrapped up the evening for our shift, and we went home. So this was, if I remember correctly, it was Friday into Saturday, and then I was on my weekend at that time. Friday morning, so at that point, I knew that I was gonna probably not be reporting to work for a while for a CIT, a critical incident team investigation. So I got a phone call the following Monday morning from our undersheriff, and I answer the phone. I'm like, hey sir, how you doing? He's like, well, not good. I have to put 2 of my deputies on leave. And I was like, okay, I understand. It's the process.
Demetrius is in the hospital now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So at this point in time, I'm completely unaware of anything that's going on. because when you are put on leave, under most circumstances, your unescorted privileges at the department are revoked. So your badge won't work to get you in and out of the facilities and whatnot. So, and that's all done because for the investigation, right? Just to ensure that it's a unbiased investigation, that we wouldn't have any influence and whatever. There's a lot of reasons. So yeah, so I'm on paid admin leave, and it's a unique situation because I'm not on vacation. You know, I'm not hurt or something like that. I'm light duty, but I'm still getting paid, but I just can't go to work. And so that happened. I was on paid admin leave, I want to say for almost 4.5 months. In that time, our household dynamic was just flipped upside down. Normally I work, and Eric's been a stay-at-home mom since we had our oldest. So Gabby at the time was, I want to say 7 or 8. And so, Erica had been just a homemaker for a number of years now. And so the dynamic in our house was just very, very different. It's like, so I was fortunate enough. I got a lot of hunting in, had a bird dog, and he turned it on that year. So took up, spent some of my time, a lot of my time hunting, bird hunting. But then I realized Erica and I realized pretty quickly, I got to find something to do. And there was no communication with the department and me at this point. I have a lawyer. And so I would email him or something like that, like, hey, any news? Nope. So it's like, okay, well, got to find something to do. So at this point in time, I volunteer my time. I want to say it was 2 or 3 days a week to a church member, really good friend of ours, Gary. He's a general contractor. And so I'm like, hey, I need to do something with my time. I need to get out of the house. Can I help you? He's like, yeah, sure, absolutely. And so showed up. I was able to just volunteer. I said, as long as the county's paying me, I'm just here to work. I'm here to learn. At this point in time, I did not have any idea that the department was considering charging us with what come to find out with a felony. And so I'm just working. So at this, so fast forward about 3 months, I'm pulling into the King Supers off the 34 business loop in Greeley to get some stuff for lunch and whatnot, because I'm showing up to work for my friend Gary. And I get a phone call from my lawyer. And she's like, hey, and I mean, just right into it. There was no, hey, how's your day going? I learned very shortly after why.
Straight to business.
Yeah. Hey, just got word from the district attorney's office. They're charging you with reckless manslaughter. I'm sitting in my car, and I'm just like, my mind went blank. My hands instantly went cold and clammy. I'm like, the life just left my body. I'm like, what? And I was shocked, to say the least. So at this point in time, I'm just like, okay. And she's like, you need to turn yourself in to be arrested today. I was like, okay, where? She's like, the Boulder County Jail. It's like, that's where I've worked. So I'm like, okay, what time? They're like, well, we've coordinated with the county. 3:30 for you, and your partner will be at 3. I was like, okay. To say my world was flipped upside down in that very brief conversation is an understatement. But I'm also a war veteran. I've been in law enforcement for the majority of my adult life. I've been in the world of just law enforcement or the military. And so it's just, I'm not unfamiliar to really shocking situations. And so, but I'm sorry, but obviously it's never been me being the focus. So I'm like, okay. So in those moments, I'm very capable of just like kind of putting my head down and just grinding. It's like, okay, cool. It's now a task. Even in that moment, I'm like, I'm able to separate myself from it. So I did. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll be there at 3:30. What do I need to wear? I've taken a lot of people, transferred custody from a lot of people. I've pat searched a lot of people. So, I'm not unfamiliar with the procedures, but I was still just kind of shocked. And so So she's like, yeah, just, whatever, t-shirt, and just leave everything at home or leave everything in your vehicle. So I was like, all right, cool. So I get to the job. So I finish my shopping at King Soopers. I go to the job site, and, technically my boss, or guy I'm helping out, Gary, shows up, and he's like, we were skinning a steel building that day. So it was, the perfect job for that day. It's mindless and it's systematic. I just got 2 bags of self-tappers with rubber washers on my impact, and I'm just, bzz, bzz, bzz. But so I start, just securing the sheet metal inside this building, and then Gary shows up. And he's like, hey, and he's a great guy, very positive, outgoing. Hey, man, how's it going? Good morning. I was like, yeah, I'm being charged with reckless manslaughter of an F4.
So quick question. When did he pass? So he's passed away at this point, and
I didn't know.
So you didn't know he had passed away?
No, there was no communication.
You put him in the van, CPR, off to medical.
So come to find out,
life support, right? And then his family decided to stop life support.
Correct.
And you didn't know this. You're just on leave, and nobody's communicating this to you.
No, not at all.
So you're finding out that he passed, and that you're being charged with that while you're at King Soopers.
Correct.
Sitting in the car.
Yeah.
Okay.
So come to find out, he was on life support for 27 days. He had been transferred from Boulder Community Hospital to another facility that had better suited facility. And so, but yeah, I'm learning a lot in a very, very short period of time.
So you're 4 or 5 months later. He's passed away 3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
Since the incident, and you're now finding out. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And then obviously the state, and they're doing their thing, getting ready to charge you.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you need a new roof or new paint job on your home or business and live in Northern Colorado? If so, check out one of our sponsors, M&E Painting and Roofing. We've been around for 20 years here in the community, and full disclosure, I am the M in M&E. Check them out at mdepainting.com. Are you a business owner who is struggling to understand and navigate the world of digital media? If so, check out one of our sponsors, Imprint Digital. They are the go-to source for everything digital related to your business. Not only are they a sponsor, but they also take care of all of our company's website. They produce this podcast, and I highly recommend them. Check them out at imprint-digital.com.
So I show up to the job site. Gary's like, hey, I'm like, well, I'm being charged. He's like, oh crap, what do you need from me? I'm like, nothing. I need to work. I need to keep my mind occupied as much as possible. He goes, okay, what time? I said, I got to be in Boulder at 3:30. He's like, cool, leave whenever you need to leave. And again, he's not paying me, but we're just communicating. So I go, they do their job. I get processed.
How is that being on the other side of that for you?
Terrible. Yeah. I mean, these are people that I know. We've shared life together. We've had kids together. Meaning our families have started, we started our young families together. I've been to their houses to give them meals and stuff like that when they have a kid, and vice versa. And so, yeah, I got arrested by my friends and coworkers.
What did they say? What was the energy feeling?
That was terrible.
How do you describe that? I mean, were things said?
No. No one would even make eye contact with me.
So they did their job.
Just did their job.
No acknowledgement of that relationship. Just they're booking you.
Nope, they just have to book me in.
Okay.
And I don't blame them one bit for that. I couldn't imagine being in their shoes.
I was gonna say, what do you do if that's one of your coworkers coming in to turn themselves in? You would have done the same thing.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I would have. Because you have to, in that moment, you just have to ultimately be professional.
Yes.
Because there's a lot riding on it. There's a lot of the interpretation of that incident. I was 21 minutes I was involved in a young man's life, and that had been dissected and just scrutinized.
Which you're going to come to find out, right?
Yes.
Going to trial and through all that.
Yeah. So, so no, they just did their job. So I leave. My lawyers are there, waiting in the parking lot for us to come out. And then we just kind of like, okay, well, this is when your date is, your preliminary hearing, your arraignment, It's like, okay. So at that point, we show up to court. We get the official charges read to us.
So you're spring of 19.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And so at that point, we get a trial date, which was, I think, 10 or 11 months out from that. And
So beginning of 2020.
yes, yeah. I want to say March of 2020. Or no, it was we were scheduled out for our initial trial date towards the end of 2019.
Okay.
So that date comes, and we realize we just make a decision as, client and my lawyers. We make a decision that Jim and I are going to both be represented by Frontline Law. And we're going to go to trial together, because in their interpretation, there's no difference in us. We're both charged with reckless manslaughter, one count.
Same charges for both.
Correct.
Okay.
And so at this point, we make a decision to go to trial together. So that date quickly approaches, and our lawyers are like, "There's a lot here, so we think it's best to ask for a continuance."
A lot, meaning that it was looking good for you, not good for you? Was there a conclusion or opinion about it, or was it just that it was a lot of...
It's just a lot of information.
A lot of information.
It's incredible to see firsthand how much information can be pulled from such a short period of time. And again, come to find out, there were extensive medical reports to review because his two of his organs had been sent to a neuropathologist out of state to be evaluated. Because the biggest thing, the reason that they charged us the way they charged us is the death certificate was written that he died of positional asphyxia with the cause of death was positional asphyxia and complicating and contributing factors of alcohol and amphetamines.
So the main reason, positional asphyxia, which you guys put him in that position.
Yes.
And what contributed to that was the result of his decision to ingest the amount of alcohol he did.
Copious amounts, yes.
But yes, and we'll talk about that. But the primary cause, though, which led to that charge, was going to be because you guys put him there, right? Like
Correct.
He was drinking, but you guys put him in a position. Okay.
Yeah. And so at that point, our lawyers felt very confident in going to trial, because when you look at the positional asphyxia, it couldn't be determined. There was no facts saying that. And in all actuality,
There's video.
There's video, but there was no video of the position of his head. Because of the positioning of the cameras in the transport van, we could only, in that video, you could only see from his basically belly button down. And so there was no, and I didn't have a body cam on that night. My partner didn't have a body cam on that night. For what reasons? I don't know. But we weren't, unfortunately, it was a trend of just not being issued the proper equipment for the task. And so, but
Was that an overarching issue with Boulder County?
that was a heavily argued matters. Yeah.
Something that was in discussion.
It was
we don't
in discussion.
have the right tools consistently to do the job we're supposed to do.
Correct.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, in both policies and procedure manuals, patrol and jail, there was not a policy and or procedure for the extra duty that we were conducting that night. And that was all known and came out in trial as well. And so the way that the reckless manslaughter charge is written is basically like you should have known. There's no intent. There's no malice. There's no, the elements of the crime do not say like, oh, I meant to do this.
So you have first degree, right? If you take us through that where that sits, just people that don't understand this can understand. I don't fully understand it.
Yeah, and I'm not. I'm not a lawyer. Another thing I found out real quick is how complex the legal procedures are and the whole process. So you have F1, that's first degree homicide.
Yep.
You have second degree homicide, F2, third degree homicide, F3. Then you have reckless manslaughter, F4. You have criminal negligent manslaughter, F5. Then you have felony menacing, stuff like that. But So under the person's crimes of the state statute. So I was charged with an F4. But the way that statute's written, again, is just simply like, well, officers or deputies or law enforcement personnel of similar training and experience wouldn't have done what you did. And therefore that's why we're charging you with this, is you should have known better. Okay. That's fair. A young man lost his life, and I will never, ever, I'll never deny the tragedy of that. And I'll never deny my part in that. But, what I can look at myself, honestly, looking back on that, the many, many times I've watched and reviewed it, is I should have done something different. You should have
known better? So you said they say you should have known better. So would you say you agree with that?
No, because the training that I had was focused on a jail setting. So a room, and time and space. Well, we didn't have that on the scene. All of my training was geared towards primarily a jail setting. So I did what I was trained to do, which was, again, referencing back to, the get down to their level, speak to them like a human, but we still have a job to do. There's different philosophies between the jail and patrol. So there we are, and it's very obvious on the video, the differences. Ask, tell, make is a philosophy that is in a lot of patrol settings, a lot of departments across the nation.
Is that the same in the jail?
No.
It's just make if it gets out of hand?
No,
or
we have time.
Just have the time.
We just have time.
So it's based more on the time that you have or don't.
Yeah, okay. And it's based on the setting. The setting is we're in a jail, we're in a controlled setting for the most part.
And ask is, hey, I'd like you to move or sit down. Tell you is move or sit down. And then make you is, I'm going to make you sit down.
Yeah, and we don't, but we don't have weapons on us as staff. We have powers in numbers, We can flood an area if there's going to be a situation that needs to be controlled. We can flood an area with bodies and then take control of that situation. Excuse me. And so I was doing that. I was doing what I was trained. Now, I did the job to the best of my ability based on my training and experience. Hindsight is just, again, not a luxury that we had. Looking back on it, I'm okay with the way I did my job that night. What I'm not okay with is I should have taken control from Jim that night. I should have been like, nope, we've got time. Who cares?
So everything you did, and we talked about this offline when we had coffee a month ago, you were okay going back and reviewing that tape, and we did that with the decisions you made. It's more so the ones you didn't.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so, I wish I would have put him in that other compartment, that's absolutely sitting him up. But we didn't have that luxury. We had to make decisions in that moment. One thing that was brought to trial was, that left compartment is the full length of the van, whereas the compartment we put him in was about only 2/3 because you had a third of the surface area, if you will, for this other compartment, and then there was that compartment that we put him in. So that was brought up, and we were demonized for it. But we had not had training on this vehicle. We were just issued it and like, hey, this is what you can do. All right, cool. And then we also had things blocking us. So these are all decisions that we're making that are just fractions of a second. And we did what we used the tools that we had available to us at the time.
And now you're going to have a lot of time to think about it as you sit through trial, and attorneys and specialists and medical, they've picked it apart with a fine-tooth comb.
Yes.
And now that 21-minute engagement is spread out over a long trial.
Long time.
As we're going through COVID.
Yeah.
And then you start to see what you call a cultural or societal shift in the view, attitude of an engagement with law enforcement.
Yes.
Because of incidents that occurred, mainly George Floyd.
Correct, yeah.
Which was a catalyst for something that's something that was already there, right? A sentiment that was already there.
Yeah.
And then that ignited what it ignited.
Yeah. So
Would you say that's?
yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
This is all my opinion. But it heavily influenced the outcome of our situation. I don't remember dates as far as the George Floyd incident and whatnot in relation to my incident. It was before, but once we asked for that initial continuance and it was granted, then we were just head over heels and involved as a country in that anti-cop rhetoric. And so it was.
And I guess like even opinions aside, right? Like keeping it to what transpired. Like we both can have our opinions, and so can people watching this. The point is that there was a shift. There was an incident and a shift. And I mean, I remember being part of it here. As we're trained in law enforcement, you're out in the street. Like that was the news.
Yeah, it was a dramatic shift.
Dumpster fire on the news at the moment, right? For that,
all the
for
time.
That cycle,
it was everywhere,
and everybody was mask, no mask.
Yep.
Back to blue, defund the police, right? It was that kind of vax, no vax, all that stuff happening.
Very polarizing.
That was the polarizing event, and you guys are having this happen and play out.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of that.
Right in the middle of it. So our trial was overall, it was delayed for about 3 years for all of those reasons, primarily COVID. And so, as a nation, we were trying to navigate that and figure that out. And so it was delayed. We finally go to trial, have a date. It's the Friday before trial, starts on Monday. And I literally came down with COVID. I woke up feeling like a train wreck. And so I call my lawyer. I'm like, and so I went, because I'm a veteran, I went to the VA. I got tested, in the parking lot, and they swab your cheek and they confirmed it. It's like, so I call my lawyer. I was like, hey, I just tested positive for COVID. And it's like, it shook things up again. So now we have to, she has to notify the courts in the state. And it's just like, okay, cool. Well, at that point, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We are delaying, because of the state of our nation and still the unknown aspect of COVID. So
as this is delaying and you're seeing these things transpire, how are you feeling about the chances of your outcome being positive, more or less at this point?
So I was sitting in my lawyer's office when the Derek Chauvin ruling came down and they said guilty. And I looked at my lawyers and I was like, we're done. We're screwed. And she was like, I get it. They have a job to do. They are the resident experts on this stuff. Like, no, it's totally different. Different circumstances, different state, different everything. And I was like, I disagree. I wore a uniform and a badge and had the authority.
Somebody's dead.
And someone's dead.
Yeah.
So we're done. And she tried to reassure me and my partner, but that's how I felt at that point. Like, we don't have a snowball's chance in hell to getting a fair trial. So,
and there's nothing you can do about it.
And there's nothing we can do about it. No, you're absolutely under the thumb of the state.
Is that an opinion? Am I making a conclusion, or is that just that is what that is? You're about to go into a trial in that kind of environment, and
it was unprecedented.
You're in the spotlight.
Yeah,
it's going to be in more spotlight or under more of a microscope than it would have been otherwise.
Correct.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I didn't feel good. To just kind of wrap that up, I didn't feel good.
Okay.
But we, again, the elements of the crime was like, initially it's like, man, I think they're throwing a Hail Mary. But no, as the trial, so that date, was postponed. I get better. Everyone is good to go. We go to trial. We have to have the masks on. It was scheduled for a 10-day trial. So that's Monday through Friday, Monday through Friday. We went ahead and went through the trial. And that was an experience that was drinking from a fire hose of how much the facts truly don't matter. The facts were simple. You can read in the newspapers that he was a 352. Well, your body's doing one of two things when it's...
What is that?
A 0.352 blood alcohol content. So that if you just kind of move some decimals, it's basically 35.2% of his blood was alcohol. And he had 62 nanograms per milliliter of amphetamines. So he was doing that kind of chemical roulette that rock stars have done for a long time. They're, the
Some
upper
kind
and the
of
downer.
upper with
Yeah.
crap ton of alcohol.
Correct. So come to find out it was Adderall, and it was his roommate's Adderall. And so
This is concluded through facts and evidence, right?
correct.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha.
Yeah. This was all acknowledged by the state and everyone knew. So
What is the outcome of that kind of combination typically?
typically when you get above a 0.20, so 20% of your blood, you are entering into fatal circumstances, content.
I'm just curious. I've been really drunk in my life, passed out, blackout drunk. I don't know about you. Have you ever, the drunkest you've ever been and experienced? Joey, maybe we'll ask you too. and you've had to blow, right? Have you ever put that together?
So I've
have
never
you ever
done that.
known you've been at a 0.352, or is that just you're not even alive at that point?
So most people are not alive at that point.
Okay.
I had never personally tested myself, but my partner had. He, again, being primarily on the streets, he had a vehicle and, take home vehicle. And so they have a PBT. And he said that he tested himself one time and he was like a 0.12. And he was hammered. And he's like, man, and he passed out, and so it's like, okay, that's his experience. But no, I had never experienced that.
Okay. But it's a load of alcohol.
It's a ton of alcohol.
Gotcha.
And also come to find out through trial, he had been living this lifestyle since he was 14 years old. Our lives intersected on his 23rd birthday, and his buddies had taken him out. He had been sober for 30 days because he had realized that he had a problem. His mom and dad, his mom had shipped him out to Colorado Springs with grandma. If I remember correctly, he and his parents were from upstate New York. So he'd been displaying this behavior since he was a child, a young teenager.
This is all concluded from the trial.
Correct.
So everything that you're sharing right now. Okay.
Yeah, this is all facts. This is all public record. File, record request with Boulder County Sheriff's Office, and this can all be confirmed.
Yeah.
So he's been doing this, but he had been sober. This all comes out in trial. He had been sober for 30 days, and then his buddies, who were still students, he had been kicked out of school for this behavior. They took him out, and they started drinking, I want to say like 9 a.m. So September 8th, 2018, 9 a.m. And he went right back into his old habits, consuming like he was used to. Again, came all out of trial. And it was medical experts testified to this. His tolerance and tendencies are two very, very different things in your body. His tendencies was to just drink and drink and drink and drink, and then steal his roommate's Adderall to counter the effects of being drunk. And that explains why it was not as easy for us to detect how intoxicated he was on scene, because he'd been doing it a while. He was very familiar with how to counter the effects of alcohol.
And I'm no doctor, but alcohol downs you, eventually passes you out, puts you out. Adderall ups you up. But what does that do within the body? I'm sure you sat through trial and there were medical experts explaining that. Is that,
yes.
Does your heart want to explode? And it's like your heart wants to explode at 1 minute. What happens?
So yeah, I can't.
How do you end up he died from that?
So unfortunately.
So what did they say happened?
So basically Adderall had metabolized and shut down, but he was still absorbing all that alcohol. And again, we verified through video evidence that they slammed more booze, at the bar before closing, and then, before leaving the bar. And so he was absolutely hammered. So what was testified was anything over to a 0.20 blood alcohol content is potentially fatal. The Adderall, the amphetamine that was in his system, the state argued that it was a therapeutic dose. Well, yeah, sure. For someone that's prescribed that.
But it wasn't his.
But it wasn't his.
Okay.
Which is a felony. If he would have been doing that in any other situation, got caught. So that was all testified to. And then also his brain and spinal cord had been sent off to be to this medical expert, a neuropathologist. And for the first time in about 3 years, It was someone had testified and told myself and my partner that we didn't do it, and they actually mattered. And that was this medical expert on the witness stand. They just inundated the jury with information. I mean, I've read the transcript, and it is so much information. And then at the end of that testimony, this doctor said, but positional asphyxia is impossible because neither his brain nor spinal cord had injury or trauma. Therefore, positional asphyxia is impossible. So at that point, the state was like, wait, what? And they ended their questioning. They asked for a recess. We leave the courtroom. Everyone leaves the courtroom, and then we followed out last. We go into our little conference room, and my partner and I lose all composure because we're excited. It's like, this is it. This exonerates us. This proves beyond a reasonable doubt.
That medical determination. And
yes. So when you look at the cause of death, positional asphyxia with complicating and contributing factors, well, get rid of that positional asphyxia. And that was our stance the whole time. That's what we believed in. So, but it doesn't matter what my lawyers think. It doesn't matter what I think. All that matters is what those jurors think. And that was a known risk because it's,
So state presents, have you defended at this point?
Mm-hmm.
So you defend, they come back.
And
closing arguments.
And
now it's going to the jury.
Yeah. So the last words of that jury heard was an absolute lie. And it was the last words that came out of Demetrius's mouth was, "Don't put me on my face." And that just simply wasn't true. We had listened to all audio recordings of that incident under enhanced audio, that was conducted by the experts, and that was never said. Unfortunately, after that, for us, what was the approach from the state was, okay, they should have known. So they went in depth about our training and what we should have done, what we should have known and all that. But when this doctor testified, gave his testimony, it blew their case up. Yep. So at that point, they just went for heartstrings.
They closed with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Lies.
So what they state, there's no evidence to conclude that. And then it's off to the jury for deliberation.
Mm-hmm. If you're a Christian business owner in Northern Colorado, check out one of our sponsors, the Foundry Advisory. The Foundry is a Christian peer-to-peer advisory network where you can plug in as a business owner, not only to talk about how to improve your business, but how to integrate your faith. Check them out at thefoundryadvisory.com. And remember, they're not only a sponsor, but I'm also a member of their group. If you've got junk in your life or business, check out one of our sponsors, Hulk Addicts Hauling. They will come to your home or place of business to remove anything that you no longer need. They also take care of demolition on any kind of construction project. Check them out at hulkaddictsjunk.com.
Back from break, coffee refill.
Yes, sir.
How you feeling?
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Energized. Love it. Spanish coffee.
So you go to trial.
Mm-hmm.
Jury goes to deliberate. What do they come out with?
So they came out, I want to say 2 or 3 times, hung jury. A few people could not say guilty. And so another valuable lesson learned. The judge made a statement to the court on the record saying, we're not going to recess over the weekend, come back with a verdict. And so they did, and it was guilty. That was shocking to say the least. The evidence had been presented, and even more so, the evidence was presented by the state, and that medical expert, that neuropathologist, it was disheartening. My partner and I had worked for over 3 decades combined to do what's right, to provide safety and security for the facility, and then also the community, and we had worked hard to represent what we thought was right and just. Yep. And unfortunately, what we experienced was there's no way to put it other than betrayal. Or we were betrayed
by
our department, by the district attorney, by our friends who were called as state witnesses to testify against us, mostly in terms of like training. There was one person who testified on the behalf of the state that actually gave a true testimony. And it was not what I would say was coached. Like, just tell the truth. Just like, I understand that, you need to be prepped when you're going as a witness for this unprecedented situation. I understand that. But it was, I believe things were portrayed that just in such a negative and a twisted manner that it was just really, really disheartening to hear. And especially the fact that they had come back several times to say, we can't be unanimously guilty or not guilty. So to hear that, and then to hear the judge say, nope, we're
Make it unanimous.
Yeah, make it one way or another.
Okay.
And then that's one thing, it's like, I'm not going to.
Was it make it guilty or not guilty, or was he's not going to accept a hung jury, or wasn't going to recess for the weekend, or was that stated? It
was not made clear. And this was already well into the evening, and it was a Friday. And so, yeah, they just came back guilty. And it's just, the gasp, the reaction was, again, just something I'd never experienced. And so, my parents, my mom, our whole gallery behind us, our support group was just, they literally gasped, and some screeched and screamed. And so at that point, again, I'm in the mode of just, all right, I'm here, just go through it and just move on. And so it's like, at that point, okay, we're guilty, but we're out on a PR bond, a personal recognizance bond. Yep. So, I don't have to go back to jail or anything like that. I was out on my own. I was out on bond the entire time, waiting, after being charged, awaiting trial, and even after the verdict was read.
So they're not holding you. They know you're going to show up. You're showing up.
Correct.
There's no flight risk. And
Correct.
You go home to sleep every night.
Correct.
As you're going to trial.
Yes.
And now with the verdict prior to sentencing, you're still going home?
I'm still going home.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, I think there was 7 weeks between the guilty verdict and sentencing. And that's typical. You'd have to ask the courts why that is, but it is. So then I go back to work. I'm working at this time. During that time, obviously I was terminated, and sent the official termination letter, priority mail and all that. So I'm trying to figure out how can I provide for my family.
A question before we get into that, just because you said something, I want to make sure we come back to it and then get into that.
Yeah.
So, hey, we were betrayed by our department. They were coached. Did they lie? Do you feel they were coached to hone in on the lack of training? Like, what were they coached in? Where was the ultimate betrayal? Did you feel like they weren't honest? They were being led? That there was an agenda? That's an accusation.
Agreed.
Towards them. So explain that more.
Yeah. It's strong
for those who are listening that
sure
you claim betrayed you. Right?
Yeah. So it's everything that was said in trial was very, very strong, and it was it's hard to hear. I was called a murderer, and I was called a lot of things. And
as they will present you,
yes,
in a case, that's their job, is to paint that picture.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in reference to the feeling betrayed, there were references or there were trainings that they interpreted like, oh, well, you should have, like, you were obviously taught that you get them off of their stomach. And it's like, yeah, I was trained to get them into a rescue position, but not in these circumstances. I was taught all of that stuff in a jail setting. I was never taught that in a patrol car, let alone a transport van for a known medical call.
So they were taking your training and saying that should have been the policy and procedure within that setting in which you claimed previously or stated previously that there wasn't a policy.
Correct.
And procedures.
And retroactively.
So they were called armchair quarterbacking or yes, putting that onto something there wasn't a policy and procedure.
No, there was not.
Why not?
You would have to ask them.
There just wasn't one.
Unfortunately,
it wasn't written somewhere and
Unfortunately, when you look
Slid
at
under the seat, there's no policy and procedure.
Correct. No, there was
for that type of situation and how it's handled.
no, there was not.
Okay, got it.
And that is all that came out afterwards.
Okay.
And several people reached out to me afterwards, like, hey, just so you know, they have like emergency trainings now for everyone to show up to address your situation. I'm like, okay. Unfortunately, when you work in a job that has such high liability, there's a saying in the military and the airlines, policies written in blood, and it's a tragedy. But it's such liability. It's life and death. So when again, going back to my opinion about things being coached, things were mischaracterized. I mean, what I learned is they can take something that I would view as pretty benign and just like twist it and mischaracterize it and present it in a manner that's like, I mean, that was said about me. Like when I told Demetrius, like, hey man, you're a tall guy, watch your head. I don't want you to hit your head. I mean, in trial, they said, see, Mr. Lunn already knew that he was too big for that space. Like, what? How did you come to that conclusion?
So your intention and then verbalization to him was interpreted by them as you knew this. Like you knew this was going to happen?
Malicious.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, that's the way I interpreted it. And I don't think there's any other way to interpret it because it was so misrepresented. It's like, you're not in my head. You don't.
Isn't that the attorneys just doing their job, though? Because
Yeah,
their job
sure.
is to convict you of that crime that the state's charged you with. So that's...
Yeah, and I have no ill
Yeah.
will towards the state and anyone. What I understood, what I learned very, very quickly is how political this is. It's not, they have a job to do, and their job is to win. Whether that win comes via a guilty verdict in a trial or whether that win comes in a plea deal, it's a win. A win is a win for the state.
So is there such thing as a fair trial? Ever? In your opinion and conclusion based on your experience going through one?
A lot of it depends on the state of our nation, the overall stance of our nation as a whole. And so during that anti-cop movement, defund the police,
That trial is influenced by that, and it
I believe so.
can't not be?
I believe so. I don't think that you could look at that objectively and say, oh no, it absolutely doesn't affect our outcome. And it didn't affect our situation. You can argue that all you want, but you're not going to convince me otherwise. And it is what it is. I don't blame anyone for doing their job. What I experienced in trial was we were not allowed to do our job. There were arguments that were not allowed. There were witnesses on our side that were not allowed because of the judge's interpretation. And that's fine. That's, that is our current legal system. Do I agree? So to answer your question directly, do I think there's a fair possibility of a fair trial? Of course. I believe in our system. I'm not going to be one of these guys that I'm not going to do exactly what they did to me in the fact that I'm going to just, from a distance, hindsight, judge them. That's what you've done to me. And I'm not that person. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, now in hindsight, because it didn't go my way, now I'm going to criticize you. I'm going to point the finger at you.
Now I can't catch a break, not get a fair trial guy.
Exactly.
Right. Yep.
That's not me. I'm not a victim.
Yep.
And I never will be a victim. I have had some really unique experiences that have taught me how to adapt and overcome. My military. I was in the Air Force. I'm sorry. I had a really cool job flying on C-130s. I've seen a lot of the world, and then I went to Iraq. Not doing that job, a different job, but in the training leading up to my job in the Air Force, I'd go through SEER school, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. It's a simulated prisoner of war camp, and it was some of the most incredible training I've ever received in my life, and I was grateful for it because it taught me how to be alone, and it taught me how to adapt and overcome at a very, very high level. Yeah. And so I'm grateful for the path that God has led me. For many, many years, I would wrap up my prayers with, God, may your will be done. And so his will is going to happen one way or another. It doesn't matter. You can either accept it or you can fight it. Well, you're going to lose that every time. So just like I accepted the guilty verdict, I will accept going to prison. I've been uniquely prepared to endure this adversity, but my wife and my kids were not.
Yeah, and I want to get into that because the whole system and fair trial. We have like 6 more podcasts we can do and go down all of the questions that I have. But I think what I'm mainly thinking about is you're sitting in the trial, wondering what's going to happen, probably going down rabbit holes, right?
Yep.
And where is the order of importance of priority? It's like, well, who are you thinking about first? Yourself, your wife, your kids. Demetrius, where is that? What's that main? Where's that? My
focus, my priority was my wife and my kids. I am the provider. I have been our whole marriage. In between, when I was on paid admin leave, my wife and I decided that we're going to have a 3rd kid, and logically, thinking about that from a logical stance, it made no sense. We were in such an uncertain time, but I'm
not thinking you were going to get charged with
not at all.
Reckless manslaughter.
Correct. But I had on one of these on a men's camping trip that I had coordinated that I had coordinated. We had gone up. We were up in the Rocky Mountains, and we were just there was a group of like 25 men and just great men. And I had an interaction with a guy I didn't really know. I knew him through church and stuff like that, but he hit me between the eyes, and it wasn't Robert speaking. It was God speaking. He said, hey, Adam, I can see something's on your mind. Like, what's going on? And my wife and I had very different opinions about having a 3rd kid at that point. My opinion was, we're in very uncertain times. Kids are expensive, tons of responsibility. Like our older 2 kids sleep through the night. Like, why do we
outnumbered and you need a minivan?
And then we need a minivan, and that was.
Then you might as well just have 4.
And then you have 7, and
And that 4th is twins, right? And then you're odd again.
Well, and my wife is a twin.
Oh man!
So it was potentially our family with that one decision, it could have grown a lot. And so, but this is just one example of many that I could point to where this was divine intervention. Yep. I had asked for God's will to be done, and He answered. Every time He will answer. And so I came back from that camping trip. Robert had I believe he was a conduit for Christ, and his word spoke to me. And I came back and I said, hey babe, let's try for a 3rd. And we did. And we have a crazy, crazy little blonde hair, blue eye, pasty skin boy that is just a firecracker, and he completes our family.
And is he born while you're in prison?
He was born because my trial had been delayed for approximately 3 years. No, my wife,
So he's here.
Mm-hmm, he's there.
Okay. Now you're going to prison.
Now I'm going to prison.
For?
My sentence was 3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
Jim was given 6.
6, yes.
Okay.
And with a 3-year parole.
Okay.
On the backside of that. I call it a tail.
Mm-hmm. So not to get too much into prison life and experience, I think that's another podcast, but I guess going through that, coming out, love to focus on just the family dynamic.
Yeah.
What are you fearful of? And you had a lot of people, I think that you knew would support you that did, and maybe some that you didn't know would support you that did, and maybe some that you thought would support you and didn't.
Yeah. I got to experience all 3 of those. First and foremost, the amount of love and support and generosity that we received, specifically my wife and my kids, was just humbling and emotional. The approximately 18 months that I was unable to provide for my family, our bills were paid. Groceries were in the pantry and in the fridge. And, they say that it takes a village to raise a child, right? Well, this took a nation to get us through this. And because we had people supporting us, social media. I'm not a huge fan of social media. I think there's a lot of negatives to social media, but in that situation, it was a blessing, and it was so far reaching that we had friends of friends and strangers to us that supported us, primarily financially, but then also just with very, very kind and uplifting words and prayers. The prayers were so they were so physically felt. It was just a wild experience. And it was something that we grew as a family in ways that I never would have thought possible. If you would have, before the incident, if you would have come to me and said, hey, Adam, you're going to go through this, and if this is how it's going to all go down, but you will obtain a certain freedom out of that, it doesn't make sense. Because I served my country honorably. I served that community honorably. I don't really care. There's differing opinions about that. But then I made
that you served the community, whether or not you served it honorably.
Correct. Because of the outcome of my incident.
Of course, there'll be that, right? And everybody's entitled to that. You put your head down at night, and then you served the community honorably.
Yes. And then even before trial and everything, I had made a decision that I had voiced to my lawyers that I had forgotten about, but my wife didn't forget, is I also made the choice then and there that I was going to serve my time honorably. That is who I am. I want to serve people. And that's why that's where a lot of the betrayal came from trial, from my department and people that I know. It's like, you know me. So that was the source of it. But
that they knew you believe you knew that they knew who you were.
Yes.
And then under that persuasion, or whatever you want to call it, that environment of trial, that they changed that.
Yeah,
presented a different opinion.
It was presented very
whatever
differently.
Influence.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In short. So now, again, going back to, post incarceration, I had a lot of, we had studied Nehemiah right before I was taken into custody. And one thing that just stood out so clearly to me was Nehemiah's prayer. When he prayed and prayed and prayed for favor with, I want to say Artaxerxes, I forget who the pharaoh was at the time, or the leader, but he was the cupbearer. But he needed to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls. That's what God had called him to do. So he prayed, God, grant me favor in the eyes of this king to go to rebuild, my town's walls, basically. And I took that prayer and I kind of shaped it towards my situation. I was like, hey, Lord, grant me favor in the eyes of those who have power over me. And in my circumstances, everyone had power over me. The judge, the COs in the 3 facilities I was in, everyone had power over me. And, it would not have benefited me to have a strong stance or opinion leading up to, trial and even sentencing. And so I had to just make a decision that, I just prayed. There is nothing I can do. I am under the thumb of anyone and everyone. I can choose to fight it, or like I previously mentioned, I can just serve my time honorably and shut up and color.
Did being on the other side of it, knowing that you were that guy that had the thumb over the inmates when you were in the prison system, did that make you view or understand that power you had more? Did it put it into a different perspective of like, I was that guy and now I'm going to be under these guys?
It definitely gave me a different perspective. That being said, there's 2 overwhelmingly approaches to law enforcement, right? There's law enforcement or there's a public servant. And my desire was always to be a public servant. So I
used a great analogy for public servant and then
badge heavy dickhead.
Yeah. Dickhead with a badge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's,
we've all met them, right?
Yeah,
I've experienced them. I have a lot of friends in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I support law enforcement. And then you have the, if you want to polarize it,
yes.
You're a bootlicker, back to blue, whatever.
Yeah.
Like a dickhead cop shouldn't be a cop. And that dickhead cop makes all cops. You call it a dickhead with a badge, right? When we had coffee.
Yep.
And that one that does that. And it's like that in any business, any industry, any profession, but especially this one where you have a higher duty and responsibility.
Yes.
That person not checked, held accountable by everybody else in that law enforcement community. They might as well all be.
yeah, that is going to be the overwhelming painting of that picture. Now we're all painted that way. It's like, but it is what it is.
When the public servants, or you want to call them, say the good ones, don't speak up against the bad ones or the dickheads with badges, then what? Because that's a true conversation.
Agreed.
Well, if you're such a great public servant and this guy or gal's not, why don't you do something about it? Because then you have this culture, right? And I'm not part of the culture.
Sure.
I experience and see what I see speaking to people that I speak to. But not that we need to get too much into that, because I still want to hone in on the family.
Yeah.
But that's something.
It's a discussion that needs to be had.
Yeah.
And and I will commend you for your approach with jiu-jitsu, with no-code jiu-jitsu, and the Adopt a Cop that you're involved with.
Yeah.
You know, so many people think that as a society, we think that law enforcement are basically special forces. And that is just simply not the case. I mean, I can't tell you how many people, when I went through the academy, had never held a firearm until they went to the academy. And now they're being given a gun and bullets.
It's absolutely pathetic, the lack of training that a law enforcement officer has, or the training they don't have.
Yes.
Somebody that comes into our gym and trains 3 to 4 times a week for 2 years, 300-400 hours, is more qualified. So a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is more qualified than a 30-year police officer that's required to do 4 to 8 credit hours or whatever of defensive tactics. I mean, we did the math.
As far as the
it's insane. And these guys have come in here, and I say, go arrest my 14-year-old son, my 12-year-old son when he's 12, and he beat the piss out of him.
Yes. No,
and these guys are like,
there are people that it's a discussion that needs to be had with amongst, I mean, all law enforcement in our nation. You know, I'm not saying, we need to, only accept these highly, highly functioning folks, but I mean, there's people that, I've stood on the range next to at a 3-yard target, and they're pulling dirt with a firearm. Yeah. And there are people that have never been in a confrontation in their life, and they're now tasked with arrest that guy that's hopped up on God knows what.
We ask the guys when they come in, have you been in a fight? Have you been punched in the face?
Been punched in the face.
You're about to be at some point. If you haven't, you're going to. And I'd rather have it be in here the first, and then you put on a glove and hit him in the face, and we've seen how they respond to that. We're going down that. Do we want to go down that rabbit hole?
No.
I mean, no. Let's come back to that.
Yeah,
that's a whole whole thing. See, we're squirreling.
I know.
Cracked up on coffee.
Right.
It's too much, Joey.
Right.
Joey.
Right.
Save us. No, man. So the family dynamic.
Yes. Yeah.
Dad's gone. Young kids. Breadwinner is gone.
So I had
Does that make your marriage stronger? Like what are those conversations? What are you thinking? How is that?
It got real primitive real fast. So I'd already been down this road, right? I had left everything known and comfortable and joined the military. Not only did I do that, then I left everything known and comfortable and went to war. So I had already had some experience in what this was going to look like. And I told my wife, I said, baby, because she's worried about me. You're going to prison. I'm like, I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you. I know from past experiences that my life is going to become incredibly simple, exponentially simpler. But your life is going to just become exponentially more difficult because you have to assume my roles. You have to maintain your roles, and then you have to assume my roles. She became a single parent overnight, and my kids became, they went to school. I went to work, I went to court, and then I didn't come home. And so I knew that was going to happen. Or once that happened, once they gave the sentence, it's like, okay, I know what to expect. But my wife and my kids had never experienced that. So my focus was on them. But the people that God surrounded our family with, my wife and my kids with, were just... my mother-in-law has kept a record of donations and stuff like that. I've looked at it once, and I can't. I cry because the generosity and the love of, I don't even want to venture to say just hundreds. I think it could be in the thousands that we received was just humbling. And it was directly because of God's love. There is no other reason. And when people go through life without a faith, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how people do life without Christ. And so, I was gone, and my wife, we couldn't contact each other. So I had to go on a courtesy hold to Jefferson County because they can't take me to the jail that I worked at for 10 years. I know that place. It's a security risk for both my partner and I. We both work in the jail. We both have been in the business. We know how things can be manipulated. It's all bad. Yeah. So we both went to, I know I went to Jefferson County. My memory's a little bit foggy now about where he went because I was just focused on my situation, of course. But so spent 5 days there in solitary confinement before I was transferred to DRDC. That's the facility in Denver. And then I was sent to Trinidad. But again, going back to the family, our relationship had to become stronger. I wasn't married or anything like that when I was in Iraq, but the communication via mail was a unexpected blessing. My wife and I just started writing letters. I wrote everything down. What else do I have to do? You read books. Okay, cool. I've read this book 3 times now, but you're in solitary confinement. I had to be in solitary because I was on protective custody.
I was going to ask you about that. You are a target in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
that's real.
Very real.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole nother discussion. But
yes.
But so my wife and I start writing down stuff. I'm provided with this minimum writing materials. So I'm using other things. You become very, very inventive when you're in custody because you got nothing but time to think and problem solve. Like, well, this is what I would like. I don't have it. How can I make it work? So, but with Erica and the kids at home, they were surrounded by angels. And that's a theme that I believe 100% in. God surrounded us. I asked him to grant me favor in the eyes of those that have power over him when he was faithful. The case managers I had were awesome. They were real. They were human. They were professional, but they were also sympathetic. Everyone could see the writing on the wall, that it was political. And I'll just leave it at that. But we were supported. I was supported. I had wonderful case managers, a lot of wonderful staff. You're going to always have poor interactions with staff, but it is what it is. But I focused on the positive. I wouldn't allow myself to do anything other than that. And my wife and I, once I was able to get phone privileges and stuff like that, we had great conversations. I had other people. Leslie was one of those on that phone list that we had incredible conversations. Everyone that I got to talk to on the phone, family. And so we had great interactions, and it forced Erica and I, the circumstances forced us to just get back to basics. And writing love letters. I had never written love letters, but I did.
Everything else being stripped away, you talked about life's going to become really simple for you, more difficult for her, but being stripped down to that simplicity brings you back to just the fundamental things that brought you guys together. So that improved your marriage.
It did.
Yeah.
So that being said, once I got to the halfway house, so I spent 13 months in DOC. And then I was accepted into the halfway house up in Fort Collins, the Larimer County Community Corrections. And Erica and I talked, that was almost harder because I'm out. And I can just walk out these doors and I've got my truck there, because I've gotten a job and stuff like that. I had the driving privileges, but it was hard. Christmas, I think I got to the halfway house November 30th of 2022, and Christmas is around the corner. I couldn't go home for Christmas. I couldn't see my family on Christmas. It was hard, and that was an unexpected reality. So I complete my DOC sentence. I complete my halfway house sentence. I'm now out on parole. Excuse me. And we were now in the honeymoon phase, right? Daddy's home. It's all good. But if you go to war or you go to prison and it doesn't change you, you don't have a heart. You don't have a conscience. You're wrong. And so I was different. And unfortunately, that after that honeymoon phase, 5-6 months kind of wore off. A lot of the stuff that I had suppressed, the feelings, the emotions, the outlooks, the hurt, just trying to digest what I've all been through. I compartmentalize and I just push it down.
We'll talk about this later.
Yeah. So, but I struggled. The first year when I was on parole was fine, but then I started to struggle, it was awesome because in a therapy session, a couples therapy session, our therapist was identified it. She goes, Adam, you don't no longer need to be doing threat assessment. That's all I had done. I'd done it for a career in between military and law enforcement. It's all threat assessment. And then when you just compound that with my incident and trial and seeing that, everyone was a threat to me. And then I'm taken into custody. Now, absolutely everyone's a threat to me. Life and death threat. And so when I got out, I was still in that mode. Everyone's a threat. Everything is a threat because everything had been taken from me. I'm now recharacterized as a felon in the state of Colorado. In our nation, I'm a felon. And it's everyone was a threat. And Eric and I fought because I would take her a statement or something like that as criticism. Well, what did I just experience? I experienced criticism in our nation at its highest form. I went to trial and the people spoke and they said, you're guilty and you're now a felon. So
anything coming out of her mouth, any statement is that.
Whoa, yes. Whoa.
Yeah.
Threat assessment. You're a threat. And I'll never forget, we had this one just discussion, we were upset at each other and I felt betrayed. And my wife looked at me, she's like, babe, I am not your enemy. In that moment, it didn't mean anything to me. And literally that was a Monday. And on Friday we went to a couples therapy and we had this incredible chaplain. And she's like, Adam, this threat assessment, this hyper vigilance and threat assessment 24/7, you need to stop. It's time to move on. And I heard it from my wife just a few days earlier, but it didn't sink in. But hearing it from an outside source, a professional on top of that, it's like, oh shit.
And then your wife's like, I told you so.
Right.
3 weeks ago. Emily just did that the other day. I do that all the time. I'm like, babe, I just learned this. She goes, I told you that a month ago.
So
do you do that, Joey, too?
Oh my gosh.
100%.
So just a guy thing. We're just slow on the uptake when the wives let us know what's really going on.
And that's something else I learned through all this is how incredibly strong my wife is. And that was another part of the transition. Problems with the transition was my wife had to become a different person as well. She had to grow. And her strength grew so much. But it was a struggle for me because we're having to reestablish our roles again. And obviously it's going to look very different. I'm not going back to a career. I got to find a job now. So I was fortunate that I had some exposure to welding and DOC and I have a great job now. And I work for great people. And it's so evident that, my daughter rides horses for great, wonderful people. We went to school with the gal that runs it, Diana. Was Diana Poovey. She's now Diana Duncan.
Poovey. Mm-hmm. No way. What's up, Poovey?
Coach Poovey.
Yeah, from
Coach
Loveland
Poovey.
High.
Yeah. Oh, he's at the ranch throwing hay, working his butt off.
What she's been up to. She was a grade below, a couple grades.
We graduated together.
I was
as well.
99.
Yeah, I was 01.
Okay, so 2. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're Coach Poovey.
So I'm out on a pass from the halfway house to go see my daughter ride horses, to watch her train. And it's like winter, right? It's February. It's cold. We're all bundled up. We're in the indoor arena. But I just see her and I was like, Diana? And it's just so small world.
Yeah.
But her and her husband's actually a law enforcement, local law enforcement. And so we have these parallels, right? And, their ranch is called Rice Performance Horses here in Loveland. And they are incredible people who Rise, their name comes from, I don't want to butcher the verse, but it's in Matthew. I want to believe it's 12:17. It talks about rising up. And so that's the origin for their name. But it's just, when you look at, the company I work for, which is Mile High Metalworks here locally in Firestone or Frederick, they're great people. And where my daughter rides, they're great people. Where my middle boy plays basketball and soccer, unbelievable people. And they're just supporters. And we've transitioned from having friends and acquaintances to family. Yeah. I mean, these are people that stood by us and believed in us and supported us in a time that we needed it the most. And so it's a blessing. It's an incredible. Another thing that I refuse to do along the same lines as being a victim, I will view everything, all of these challenges, all of this suffering, this time of adversity as an opportunity. This is an opportunity to learn and grow. If I were to take another stance on it, I would be a fool. Because, when you look at life, I used to joke about it in the military and in law enforcement. There's three ways, that I can go down with a hard situation. I can laugh, I can cry, and I can quit. When you show up on scene for certain stuff, it's, when you're in this world, law enforcement, EMS, all these first responders, you deal with people on their worst day and you see life and death all the time. It's a very, very, very difficult job that you don't ever know what you're going to experience. So, my wife learned pretty early on in my career, don't ask me how my day went. Did you have a good day? Yeah, well, I'm home and I'm safe. So I had a good day. You don't need to know the details. It's a dark, dark world. And we absolutely need those folks. We need those good folks, going back to what we've talked about with, law enforcement, public servant. We need more public servants. We need more peace officers, not law enforcement. We don't need this. Yeah. Anyways, but so yeah, it's an opportunity. When life kicks you in the face, it's an opportunity. What are you going to do with it? And we have been first and foremost blessed just with our faith, our parents, right? Erica and I both grew up in the faith, and it's just the greatest gift you can give your children. It's not a how-to, but it's guidance, and it's all out of love. And when you are, I view myself as just blessed. My wife and I and our kids, we're blessed because the way that God has provided, it doesn't make any sense any other way. So it's not easy. And I don't say any of this to diminish, again, the overall fact that a young man lost his life and parents lost their son and sister lost her brother and friends lost their friend. This is not, again, I'm not a victim. I own my part in the loss of life. And what I wish I would have done, I wish I would, just like everyone involved in that incident, I wish I would have done something differently. But I worked with what I had. What I knew at that moment, first of all, was almost nothing. And it's tragic. And my heart hurts for the family. They lost a family member, someone that they absolutely loved. But we went through our own stuff as well. And this is not a comparison. Like I said, I'm not gonna avoid the reality, but there's many different realities.
And I'm hearing you taking ownership of the actions and how you showed up to the situation, which resulted in what it resulted in, and there's consequences to that.
Yes.
And you served those honorably, and tons of people supported you.
Yes.
Made your marriage better.
Absolutely.
And your faith stronger.
Yes.
What do you want to say, and I'm sure you already have, to the people, any people specifically, now that we're here, this is going to be all over the internet.
Right.
What do you want to say to them, just in generalities or anybody specific, just about their support and what that means? If there's anything to say, it doesn't even necessarily need to be said.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, simply put, there aren't words. And thank you seems almost shallow. and insincere, but it's just, there's a thank you. And, I've had the opportunity to thank a lot of people in person. But there's so many people that are, different states and just, different seasons of life now that I'll never cross their paths again. But if I could say anything to them, it would just be that, the love and generosity and prayers that you shared with me, I will pay that forward. And I will not let this tragedy occur in vain. And so I will just do everything in my power to further the kingdom of Christ. I will take it with a very intentional and deliberate approach. And that's something that I've said, when you're talking to your case manager and stuff, well, what do you want? And that's something that I've said is I want to be more intentional and deliberate in everything I do. From every day is an opportunity to be more intentional and more deliberate. And what that has done is it has made some things, primarily relationships, harder, but it's also opened up avenues and opportunities for me to just continue to grow. But I will be intentional and deliberate in everything that I do. I wish that wouldn't have come at such a cost, and that truly, truly breaks my heart. And that's all I can do at this point.
Yeah.
I will move forward. I will continue to love and grow and just be more intentional and deliberate in everything that I do. Yeah. And that's what I can do to honor a lost life.
Yeah. So this morning I knew you were coming to the show, and I pulled up online your statement to Demetrius's family, which was obviously done right before sentencing.
Yeah, it was at sentencing.
At sentencing. So you're under that. You're in that part of the story.
Yes.
And we're years later now. Anything else you would add to that, say to that you feel needs to be said? Anything else to share with them, for them, to them at this point?
I am a parent of 3. No, I mean, I am extremely and genuinely sorry that you lost your son. Your son was taken. The only thing I would ask first and foremost is forgiveness. Forgive me for my inaction. And I hope if I can convey anything to them, I didn't want anything other than to get your son to help. I wanted to just get him to where he could get the care that he needed. But I can't live in the past. I am very, very remorseful for my inaction. So.
Well, Adam, this has been the longest podcast ever that we've had. I love that you came on and shared this story here publicly first.
Well, thank you.
With everybody tuning in. Man, we wrap up all the shows the same way. But before we do that, anything else that you just wanted to share that's on your heart or that you think would be appropriate at this moment before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, at this moment, I appreciate the opportunity. This has been a difficult journey for me. And I'll just speak for myself right now, but this is an interesting opportunity. Again, I'm going to frame it that way. This is an opportunity for me to tell my story. If I can offer anyone anything, it's just that if you truly surrender to Christ, it doesn't mean your life will be easier, but it will give you a source and a real tangible relationship opportunity with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and then his brothers and sisters. And if you just truly surrender to that, I'm not saying it'll be easy, but you will, the gift that you will receive is a joy and a peace and a humility that can be contagious. And It's an opportunity. So take everything, all the lumps that life throws your way, and view it through a positive lens, please. And if you do that with the humble intention of furthering Christ's kingdom, then it's honorable.
Well, Adam, you picked your favorite color. I thought it was pink. You went red.
Well,
and you've got a statement you want to leave with the world when you leave it. What is it?
So the first part is a verse. I didn't write it on here, but it's Philippians 4:13. Feel so strongly about it. I got it tattooed on my arm, but it's, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that's a very simple statement that is obviously very, very complex. But that is KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. That's my overall prayer. And this is something that I've thought about a lot, and I've try to take everything and try to pare it down to one statement. That's a daunting task, and one that I was very anxious about, because I don't want to. Again, I want to be intentional and deliberate. But what I came up with a huge contribution to my wife, because she's my rock. True freedom is dying to oneself and surrendering everything to Christ. And this isn't my favorite color. This is my wife's favorite color. So,
Adam Lunn. That's a wrap.
Hey, thank you, brother.
Thank you, Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, drop a comment below. Make sure to watch the next episode, and don't forget to subscribe. If you're a business owner looking to improve your life, leadership, faith, family, and business, I've got a couple of free things that I'd love to share with you. So go to mattshoup.com and download my free tools. I guarantee these couple of things will get you started off in the right direction.